Can you gain weight on a carnivore diet? Of course, you can gain weight. You can gain weight on any diet. What is required to make quality gains in lean muscle tissue is a little different than what's required just to gain mass in general, right? If you're just trying to gain weight, put on fat, whatever, you just got to eat a bunch of food. If you want to put on lean muscle tissue, you kind of have to dial it in a little bit better. Obviously, you have to resistance train. Right? No matter what diet you're on, if you're going to put on muscle tissue, you have to resistance train. And I put up a picture on Instagram the other day. There's 5 months in between these two pictures. I was able to put on about 10 pounds of lean muscle mass. Now, the few months before that, I wasn't training much at all, so some of that muscle mass was regaining muscle that I already had. But I was able to put on a significant amount of lean muscle tissue in a short period of time and add, basically, as far as I can tell, no fat. The way I was able to do this on an all-animal food, carnivorous diet is pretty simple. There are several factors required in order to gain weight. A lot of people coming into a carnivore diet, a lot of people coming into our channel are leaving nutrient-deficient vegan diets. Talking to guys like Drew Morg on YouTube, Drew Morg, M-O-R-G, Andrew Morgan. He came off of a long-term vegan diet, was trying to make gains, and was just getting so pissed off because he was unable to make the muscle gains he wanted. His digestion was getting awful from trying to increase the calories on the gerbil feed diet of a whole food plant-based diet. A lot of people leaving the vegan diet are trying to gain some weight. Carnivorous diet and a ketogenic diet make it very easy for people to lose weight. They make it very easy for people to lose body fat. If you're trying to gain weight, a low carbohydrate approach might be very difficult, might make it very difficult for you to add mass. The reason being, ketones are very satiating. They induce satiety. If you're getting enough protein, right, and you're burning fat for fuel, your body gets into a state when insulin is very low, and the hormonal state of having significant amounts of glucagon and low insulin makes it to where we are just not hungry, and it makes it really easy to burn body fat. Great news if you're overweight. Great news if you want to lose fat. Kind of bad news if you want to make some gains. So how was I able to gain 10 pounds on a carnivore diet? And how might you go about trying to gain weight on a carnivorous diet using all animal foods, right? Animal foods being the most easily digestible, most nutrient dense, with those nutrients being in the most bioavailable, easily assimilable form without all the accompanying anti-nutrients like phytins, lectins rather, oxalates, histamine, salicylates, all these anti-nutrients that make it very difficult to absorb and assimilate minerals, and that make it very hard for people to digest their food in general. Animal foods give us everything we need in a tight package that tastes great and is very, very easily to digest and assimilate. Well, first of all, I made sure that I was in a caloric surplus. So before I started trying to make these gains, I was eating an intermittent fasting routine. I was eating within like a 6-hour window of the day. I was eating between the hours of 11 and 4, and it was usually 1 to 2 meals, and I was eating about 1 kilo of meat per day with some added fats. Now the added fats would be from like bone marrow, some sheep fat, sometimes beef suet, really big fan of, sometimes eating some brain, right? Really big fan of organs, so I was including liver every now and then, which gives a little bit more protein, gives lots of vitamins and minerals, especially vitamin A and B vitamins. Also was including, kidney, heart, all these organs. We like to eat nose to tail. And so what I was doing was a short eating window, and I realized, of course, you're eating in a small window, you've got to find a way to get more calories in. So intermittent fasting, not the best thing if you're trying to make gains. So what I did was drop the intermittent fasting, started eating breakfast. Ate about 1.5 pounds of meat for breakfast. Right? So I'd eat like a 750 gram bone-in ribeye, and I would add significantly more fat. All right, fat being the fuel source, the protein being the building block, the protein stimulating a little bit of insulin release, that insulin, which is very helpful for making gains. mTOR getting activated by getting significant amounts of leucine from the protein, but of course adding fat for fuel so that I had the metabolic energy to actually be in a surplus. Did that for a couple of months, made significant gains. Also at times I was pulsing and titrating in carbohydrates. And these carbohydrates were from animal sources. What is an animal source carbohydrate? Well, it's actually one of my favorite sources of carbohydrate, honey. So I started including a little bit of honey and also some animal carbohydrate from whole milk. Raw, fresh, whole milk. Every once in a while I would have some honey, and I was usually like 2 or 3 times a week. I'd have maybe less than a tablespoon. I went through a couple week periods where I would eat maybe 2 to 3 tablespoons, and I would have that in some yogurt, right? Very easily digestible, very easily absorbed. Honey doesn't tend to mess around with blood glucose as much as other sugar sources. So the bees take the material, they take the raw material from the plants, they take the pollen, the nectar, and they turn that through enzymatic processes, through their saliva, and through this crazy alchemical process in the beehive. They turn that into something that is so sweet and so good and so easily digested. And of course, I eat it in its raw form, right? You don't want to pasteurize honey because you'll kill the living enzymes in it. So raw honey, some raw milk, pulsed in there and titrated in there at specific times. You would usually do it around training, right? So I'd try to train each body part like 2 times a week. As far as training goes, there's no specific modality that you need to do. If you want to gain muscle, you have to break down the muscle tissue, trick your body into believing that it needs more muscle. So you do that by lifting some weights. So there's no one specific way of going about it. I tend to lift like heavy on a body part once a week, and then a little bit lighter, higher reps another time during the week. So say if I'm doing bench press, I might work my way up to, anywhere between 80 to 100% of a 1 rep max, and in one workout. And then another workout might be significantly lower on the weight, like 60% of the 1 rep max for more reps to failure. And I would do that a couple times a week. Let's see, what else? In maintaining a caloric surplus on a carnivore diet, if it's difficult, that's when I would recommend bringing in some carbohydrate. You don't need carbohydrates to gain weight. All right, a lot of this, during this 5-month period, I probably included carbohydrate for less than 2 months. Actually, the last few weeks I've been drinking some more milk just because I really like raw milk. I'm a really big fan of whole raw milk. So I've been doing that. If you're lactose intolerant, obviously you want to stay away from the dairy. But dairy is very palatable. It makes it very easy to eat more. A lot of people gain weight accidentally when they're trying to do a low-carb, keto, or carnivore diet when they're having too much dairy. It's because it's so palatable. It's really easy to eat a lot. Dairy is a great weight-gaining food. Honey, great weight-gaining, animal-based carbohydrate food. You're trying to lose weight? You got metabolic syndrome? If you're trying to lose fat, you're going to want to avoid those carbohydrates. So, increased calories, lifted weights, had kind of a carbivore diet, always including organ meats, eating nose to tail, really huge fan of bone marrow, eating those palatable foods that help you get the calories up. Another really good thing, if you're trying to gain weight, another just interesting recipe, bone marrow, which I usually like to eat raw, with a little bit of honey with it. Really, really good. It's like ice cream, cheesecake or something, right? Raw bone marrow, especially from the lower leg, is very creamy and buttery, and when it's cold in the refrigerator with a little bit of honey drizzled on top of it, you only need a small amount. Right? If you've been doing a keto or carnivore diet for a long time like I have, sweet tastes super sweet. Almost too sweet. So the honey was nice. Like when I had the honey, I would sometimes have it with yogurt, sometimes have it with some bone marrow, and that makes it really easy to palate. Even though honey tastes amazing, it can be a little bit sweet for some of us who've been on a low-carb, keto, and carnivore diet for a long time. Another food that I include that really helps me to digest. You know, when you're trying to increase your calories, it can be difficult to digest all that food, and that's a major problem a lot of people run into when trying to make gains. They're shoving food down their face. Sometimes people are so attached to intermittent fasting, they're not spacing out meals enough, and they're not digesting the food well. You see this in the vegans. All these vegans who are trying to eat enough calories on their whole food, plant-based diet wreck their gut because they're taking in shitloads of anti-nutrients and make it so hard to absorb and retain minerals, right? But also, there's just so much freaking fiber, there's just so much bulk that it's nearly impossible for them to digest it. A lot of them get stomach acid issues. A lot of them are drinking like alkaline water, juicing, doing all this stuff. And it just makes it hard to digest all that food sometimes when you're throwing so many things in there. What one of my favorite foods is for improving digestion is high meat. Now, it sounds freaking crazy, but a lot of us carnivores are really into the high meat. And, even Stephenson wrote about it in his book, which came out in, I believe, the 1920s, The Fat of the Land. He writes about high meat and how a lot of people, even in the European population, very much enjoy intentionally fermenting, rotting meat. So I'm a huge fan of high liver. We actually show you how to make high liver in the Carnivore Cookbook, which I'll make sure to talk about that a little bit later. We just dropped it this week. Super stoked to finally have that out. We show you how to make high meat. Super simple. You chop it up, you put it in a jar, you leave it in the fridge, you open it up every once in a while, air it out, maybe shake it up now and then, and you let it sit in there for a few months. When that stuff is ready, it is so good. I use it as a digestive tonic. It helps me to eat more food. It helps me to digest that food. Jessica actually finds that it reduces appetite, and this can be true, right? If you just have a few pieces of high meat, it gets you a lot of energy. I mean, some people call it high meat, or they say they call it high meat because it almost gives them a high. Right, it gives you a lot of energy. We all know that the gut-brain axis is crucial. Many neurotransmitters are actually manufactured by gut bacteria. High meat is so interesting. There's so many different flavors that come through. You can have one liver and make 3 different jars, and I've had this happen. 3 different jars, one animal's liver, all made on the same day under the same conditions, all in the same fridge. Every one of them tasted totally different. Completely different. Some of these can taste like almost red wine. Some of them can taste a little bit sweet. Some of them can have this deep, bitter, herbaceous, like funky, almost bitter flavor. And there's so much going on there. I really like high liver. And long story short, helps me to eat more food and digest it. Really helps me to digest that meat. Now, I always cook my steaks rare. I find that the more rare it is, seems to digest a little bit easier. A lot of people are obsessed with eating raw meat. I like some beef tartare now and then. Sometimes I'll have a raw steak if I don't want to cook it, but I like to get a little bit of a sear on one side and then just barely sear it on the other side. Get a decent crust one side, barely sear it the other side, big thick steak, and pretty much cold and raw in the middle because I pull it out of the fridge right before I cook it. So yeah, those are the strategies that I use to increase caloric intake and make foods that are delicious and palatable and that I can eat more of in order to gain weight, to gain muscle tissue on a carnivore diet. A lot of people coming off vegan diets need to add some mass. A lot of people coming off vegan diets lost a significant amount of muscle mass, sarcopenia seemingly being a major issue. I mean, just look at these vegan YouTubers withering away, stubbornly holding on to their diet saying, oh, these people aren't doing it right. But look at guys like Drew Morg. He added back animal foods, went straight from vegan to carnivore because he was hearing all this stuff about carnivore, and he made so much muscle gain that he was pissed. He was pissed he didn't go earlier back to animal foods. Elise from Raw Alignment also noticing effortless muscle gain after coming out of the vegan malnutrition cult and nourishing herself with the most nutrient-dense foods that contain all the nutrients we need in their most easily digestible and bioavailable, assimilable form. Animal foods, animal fats and proteins, ruminant animals providing some of the most delicious and nutritious foods we can eat. So that's it. Another thing that I definitely focus on when I'm trying to make gains is, of course, recovery, right? You got to stimulate the muscle growth. You got to stimulate mTOR. You got to give it a little bit of insulin flowing through there. Carbohydrates can help, but they're not necessary. They just make it easy to eat more food. The raw milk, very, very easy to, throw a couple liters of raw milk down, and that's increasing the calories quite a bit. And, I made a lot of little changes here and there, but that's kind of, that's the basic skeletal outline of what I did to make those gains, to throw on 10 pounds of lean muscle mass in about 5 months, which isn't crazy. It's not out of this world gains, but pretty good for me who's been resistance training for a while. Right. Another thing, recovery, very important. So something I was doing during this time was saunas regularly. Of course, increasing my sodium intake around the saunas, making sure my electrolytes were up. That's why I was eating a lot of meat. Also ate fish, swordfish, egg yolks, another couple of my favorite foods. Fish having a lot of potassium in it. Uh-oh. Get out of here, slaves. Go, slaves. Goodness. Our dogs are so well trained, they leave the chickens alone. The chickens think that they can just wander into their freaking house. Crazy. They poop all over our porch here, my little home gym. Sauna. I really like wet saunas. I really like steam room, rather. Turco, you call it. Here, they call it a turco. I'm a huge fan of it. It just feels so good. Really seems to help recovery, really seems to help with sleep as well. And then also red light therapy. Right? Red light therapy has been shown to improve recovery, to improve post-workout recovery, to improve deep tissue repair, and I'm just a huge fan of red light therapy. So I get in front of the Juve every single night, and I kind of spot treat the muscle groups that I worked that day, if I worked out that day. And I like to read underneath it before I fall asleep. It really helps to improve melatonin production, which if you're not sleeping well, if you're not recovering from the workouts and you're not in a calorie surplus, you're not going to make the gains. So sauna, red light therapy, getting out in the sun whenever I can. It is the rainy season here, so the sunshine is kind of limited lately. It's a cloudy day today. You can't really see. It's a pretty cloudy day today, so don't get as much sun as I would like. I'd like to be able to get like the significant amount of sunshine every day, but it doesn't always happen. And the red light therapy also really helps with mood. Right? If there's not very much sunshine, I know it affects my immune system, but I also know that it affects my psychological state, my mood. I just feel so much better when I can get some sun. I work a lot on the computer. Here I am right here making a video. I stare at the screen a lot, and I know it's not good for my eyes. I know it's not good for the central nervous system, and getting outside just really improves my mood. And the red light therapy helps with kind of that seasonal affective disorder that so many of us get when we're deprived of the natural light, that full spectrum sunlight that is so important. What's up, ribeye? What's up, ribeye? You're a good doggy. So, that's it, guys. You want to make some gains on a carnivore diet. It might be harder to stay in a surplus, but hey, if you're coming out of a vegan diet, you're probably going to be pretty hungry, and it's going to be easy to eat a lot of meat. If you're trying to lose body fat and build muscle at the same time, it helps to really dial in the macros and make sure you're not in too much of a surplus. Me myself being in like a maybe 20 to 30% surplus at times, that's a pretty big surplus. And I was pretty lean starting off going into it, but the tissue that I put on was pretty much all muscle. I don't think I put on any fat as far as the percentage goes. Doesn't seem like I increased my body fat percentage at all making those 10 pounds of gains. So you can find more at primaledgehealth.com. The Carnivore Cookbook is finally out. We're really excited to finally share that with you guys. And here at Primal Edge Health and our vegan rescue operation that we run here, it's been really cool seeing all the feedback from ex-vegans who are just getting back into using animal foods. So it's a book that is all animal foods. Not a single plant was harmed during the making of this book. It is an ethical carnivore book. No plant products at all. And there's even a couple recipes that are carbivore, right? I mentioned, honey and dairy. We show you how to make ice cream, for instance, that has some honey in it. I really like that recipe, and the kids love it. And it's just a really fun book. It's the Carnivore Cookbook for people who really love animals. and that's available exclusively on our website. We're not selling it on dumbass Amazon. It's available only on our website, and we're just really excited to have that out and to see the positive reception that everybody's giving us on that. Jessica worked her butt off on it. She's been working on it since like July of last year, and it really shows. So there's over 100 recipes. It's called the Carnivore Cookbook, 0 carb recipes for people who really love animals. You can find that exclusively at primaledgehealth.com. So get off the freaking computer. Get off your Facebook. Kill your dang Facebook account. Get off the toxic social media. Get out in the real world. Talk to real people. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to your family. Make real communities. Get out there. Make those gains if you want to. Go live your life.